Hello, Facebook world. We'll give everyone a minute to get online. Hi, Alex. How's it going?
Good, good. It's already happy hour here.
It's always happy hour in San Diego, so I don't know.
That's true.
Or in my life or something. I don't know. So we'll give everyone a minute to get on. There's a little delay with Facebook too. So today we are talking crisis communications in general, but how marketing really holds a responsibility for execution on a lot of that. You know, it's interesting when I got my master's in communication. That's what really brought to light for me who owns the different pieces of how an entire organization will communicate out to not just to its own employees, but to the world, depending on what the brand is. And so we're going to dig into that a little bit. It's something more and more that's becoming more and more important. And I mean, technically not, it shouldn't be more and more important, but because of everything going on in the world, I think it's making us think about it more and what would you do? And I do find myself in situations when I'm like, at a concert or whatnot, I find myself thinking, what would I do if there was an open shooter situation, or, and it doesn't have to be an open shooter situation, right? It could be a tornado or, whatever. I mean, it's any number of things that we could be addressing. So, all right. So we have one viewer. Thank you, viewer. I am Megan Powers, and my company is Powers of Marketing, and this is a live broadcast for Making a Marketer, episode 31. And it's been a minute since I've done a live show, so I'm excited to get back on Facebook Live and to welcome Alex Plaxton, who's been on the show a few times before. Alex, will you tell our listeners and viewers about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Alex Plaxton. I have a company called Little Bird Told Media. I specialize in digital communications consulting for the events industry specifically, but also a lot of companies within the events industry. So mainly conferences, events, trade shows is what I do. I build a digital communication strategy. And in the last year and a half, a big part of that has become crisis communications.
Yeah, and we'll dig into why here in a sec. Somebody who commented on the announcement of this broadcast said this is something we need to be thinking about more and more, and it's something that people have sort of like pushed to the side, like, oh yeah, that's something we need to do, and so I thought this would be a good topic for today. And one of my comments back to one of those people was, absolutely, you're unlikely to get a positive result if you haven't planned for it. So what would you say, Alex, is the number one tip for putting together a solid crisis communication plan?
Yeah, one, doing it. One of the things that I ask a lot of, I speak about this a lot, and one of the things I ask is typically who is in charge of your social media and your communications on a day-to-day basis, but also at your events. And then I ask, is that person aware that crisis communications is part of their job? And maybe a third of the hands in the room go up. And the third question I ask is, okay, great. Are they trained in crisis communications? And you might get in a room of 100 people, 2 or 3 hands that are still up. And so it kind of terrifies me a bit that every place that I go, if there was to be a crisis, that there is no plan in place for how to communicate with the stakeholders, attendees, your members, your customers, etc. And I go to a lot of events. I speak at a lot of events, and you'd be surprised, even the events that I speak at, I ask them, I say, can I see your crisis communications plan? Because that's what I'm speaking on at that event. They're like, oh, we don't have one. I'm like, you understand how important this is, and you don't even have one. But the number one tip, I think, is starting at the foundation and building a good, strong foundation with the rest of your team and your company. I think it's a step that's often forgotten because it takes everyone coming together, your CEO, your head PR, your if you have legal counsel, your legal counsel, and then the head of every department really needs to come together and do a vulnerability audit. Because if you don't know what the potential risks are at your event, it's really hard to create a crisis communications plan without that knowledge. It's just too broad. It's an overwhelming task, and that's why you get some organizations that have crisis communications plan where it's just not even a good crisis communications plan because they haven't taken that first step.
Right. Yeah, as Shannon said, scary. But I get it, and I see even it could be the smallest thing for your guests at least to have something in the program, in the app, like a where do you go if something could happen. Like I said, I was like in the middle of a field at a festival where I knew we weren't going to encounter the same thing that they did in Vegas because there was no high tall buildings around us. But at the same time, I was like, making a plan for myself. Where would I go?
Mm-hmm.
So Shannon wants to hear a little bit more about the vulnerability audit. Can you just talk high level on like some things that are in?
So typically, it's getting the crisis communications team together and then brainstorming what the potential vulnerabilities of your event are or of your company in general. And typically I break those down into 10 different categories of crisis, and you can Google that's not hard. But typically when you ask someone to brainstorm what can go wrong without those kind of micro categories of what can go wrong, it's just an overwhelming task and people don't know where to start. But after you brainstorm all the things that can go wrong, rating them and giving them a risk rating, essentially, of what are the consequences if this actually does happen, and how likely is this to happen? That way you can prepare for, okay, well, this is probably low risk. This probably isn't going to happen. So we'll be prepared with some kind of holding statement or something, but this isn't something we really need to be concerned about high level. But those really extreme risks and those high risk areas, that way you can prepare specifically for them if they were to happen at your event. For example, protesters, right? If you're a controversial organization, you always expect to have protesters, and that is something that can lead to big consequences for your event and also is likely to happen. That's something that you can prepare for specifically for your organization and your event.
Well, and that would require you to probably plan on like being in touch with the local police department, having extra security. So then that's going to touch your budget too. Yeah. So there's a trickle down.
Oh yeah. Sure. If you don't think crisis communications has anything to do with money or your brand or the potential for your event to even happen in the future, you're wrong. A crisis communications plan is essentially an insurance policy.
Right. But even actually bigger than that, because it's not just going to pay the bill. It's steps to prevent things from happening potentially.
It's absolutely preventative as well. Part of doing the vulnerability audit actually helps you potentially prevent these things from happening as well, which is why I really call it the foundation of your plan, because it's actually going to help you in other areas too.
Right. For sure. Thanks, Shannon. Those were great questions. So you are currently teaching a certificate course through MPI on crisis communications. Can you briefly tell us, what sparked the creation of the course, and how long is it and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so I've been talking about social media and digital communications in the events industry for about 3 years now. But about a year and 4 months ago, when the Las Vegas shooting happened at the Route 91 Harvest Festival, I was awake at the time because I'm always up late. And I was watching and I was waiting for some kind of response from the social media team. And there just wasn't one. And I waited and waited. The next day, I waited and I waited. And it wasn't until 24 hours later that they deleted every single thing on their social media feeds, everything on their website. and posted up a very legalese statement, which I'm sure was approved by 1 million people before it went up. And that's all that's ever existed since. And I realized that, this is not something we talk about in this industry. It's not even something we talk about in the marketing world in general. Is, okay, who's responsible for this? And are they prepared? And is that their plan? And is that the best plan that they could potentially have? Because if you know who planned that festival, I'm sure that was their plan, was to wait 24 hours. But in this day and age, you can't wait 24 hours.
Well, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but just not just for PR purposes, but as an outlet to let every loved one who had somebody there for anything, like boots on the ground. Granted, they were, I'm sure, in a panic, but my guess is they had no real plan in place. Otherwise they would have, or like you say, they were just kind of like covering themselves. But for sure, it should have been in a plan that at least, at a minimum, they had someone giving information about
something. I call it duty of care, right? It's duty of care for your attendees, your customers, and their families, friends, loved ones, etc. It's you have a responsibility. It's one of the reasons why I suggest that anyone in a marketing position also takes customer service training, because in a crisis situation, the likelihood that you're also going to be serving as a customer service outlet is very high. And there has to be a level of empathy in a crisis situation. So that incident kind of catapulted me into this very deep research into, okay, what's out there, what exists, what can I be teaching people, how can I be teaching people? And it developed into a 6-hour course that I developed, and MPI heard about it. I had already done a beta version of it, and I told MPI about it, and they were like, this is exactly the content we're looking for. And so we developed a partnership where I've been presenting this content now. I've presented it twice, and I've got 2 more scheduled right now. It's a 6-hour certificate course, basically walking you through the entire process of creating a crisis communications plan. And then the last part of it is actually doing a real-time exercise, which it's kind of like a proud papa moment for me, because watching them actually go through the process, and obviously it's an exaggerated process. We're doing this in an hour versus, a full day of an actual crisis happening. But I throw a lot of things at them, and the way that they handle them and make these quick decisions, because they've made a plan and they know the plan, it's just like brings a smile to my face, because that's how it always should be.
Right. That's very cool. I forget. I had something so profound, and I forget what it was going to be. All right. So, yeah, that's what it was. What's the one thing that has surprised you the most? You might have already said it about the people in your in the courses that you're teaching.
Yeah. So, what surprises me the most about the people in the course is that a lot of them would not be the ones who implement the plan. A lot of them are the event coordinators, or a lot of them are even third-party planners who are looking to create these plans for their clients, crisis communications plans for their clients. And at the end of the day, they're not even the ones executing it, but they understand the importance of it. And they know that if they don't do it, their client's not going to, or their communications department hasn't done it. So for me, that's kind of exciting, because it's not just one person's job. We
Right.
have to understand that this is a team effort. You can't just take one person in your organization and say, okay, we need a crisis communications plan. Can you take this week and make one? It's just, you can't just have that one perspective, and not just one person is going to know how to handle every situation. So it really is a team effort, and so it's nice to see that.
Well, not just that, but then it's like a web, right? If you're teaching people who are teaching other people, or who are sharing the importance of it, with a wider range of brands and clients, then that's overall that's going to be better for the industry, for the world, really.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of, I mean, I love it when a plan comes together, but you gotta have the plan. So, and I'm guessing this is a separate answer, but it's another, what's the number one question? What's the number one misconception about the role that marketing plays in being prepared for a crisis?
That it's not their job. For a marketer to be doing something in the moment, very visceral, like communicating customer service and information and things like that, it's kind of if they're not trained in it or they've never done exercises or anything like that, it can be a scary prospect. That's a lot of weight on your shoulders. It's another reason why it's so important to be prepared, because in the moment, just the adrenaline's rushing. And if you have never practiced these tactics that go into crisis communications before, I can understand how it is overwhelming, and it's something that you do not want to do.
Right.
How you're like, cool, well, we can do this in 24 hours, right? We don't need to respond right now, because you don't want to. That's a human characteristic. When you're in something that is scary and adrenaline, and you think that, if you don't respond the right way, someone could get hurt or someone could get in trouble. Like, it's just really important that you're trained and you practice these tactics.
Well, and again, going to the importance of the advanced plan is getting on the same page with legal, because I think that's part of what holds marketers up, is the not having the what they feel is the right or the like that sort of open avenue to respond in a proper way. They're afraid they might get in trouble, or they might get the company in trouble or whatever. But yeah, again, going back to the plan, having the plan and having everyone buy in, right? It's not just, you're not creating it in a vacuum. Everyone in the company, including legal, needs to have a say.
Yeah.
But that needs to include timeliness, not waiting, because it's the middle of the night to call the company's attorney. You should already know what your abilities are in the moment.
Well, that's the beauty of a plan, is a plan should have holding statements that have already been approved by your legal counsel or your legal representative for your organization. So that way you can comfortably tweet something out or send out an email or post something to the website that has already been approved. And that buys you time to figure out what your next message is going to be.
Right. 100%. So as the world turns, as I wrote the question, for those old people listening, they'll know that was a soap opera. So there's some kind of crisis every single day, at any given place in the world. And so that, to me, it makes it obvious. It's not just around events. It could be around an event, but we should be thinking of the planning that should be done in general, really, for any organization to have it. Do you have people, has anyone attended? I mean, I know you're focused on an MPI, right? So that by nature means it's meeting professionals who are putting on events. But what would you say to the marketing community at large for how they can really champion doing something like this in their own organization, surrounding everything, not just events?
Well, yeah, and it's funny because the first class that I taught, we had someone who, yes, is in the meetings industry, but she was the marketing director for a supplier, a vendor. So she is planning her own events, and she sat in and she got just as much out of it as everyone else who were event planners. Here's the thing. There's 3 things at risk if you don't do it, right? You've got misinformation that can be spread. That's really important, because obviously You want to be in control of the messaging. That's a whole thing with marketing, is you want to be in control of the message. But also customer distress. So we used to call it fight or flight. But I like to call it now fight or flight to insight, because after that fight or flight initial response, the next thing that we as humans are trying to do now is get insight. And the first place studies have been done, the first place people go for information is to what they consider to be the authority on the situation. And that's going to be your social media accounts. That's going to be your company's Twitter account, your company's Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. If they don't find the answers they're looking for there, they're going to go elsewhere. They're going to keep searching, and they may never get the answers that they're looking for. And that can cause long-term distress if they can never get to insight. So it's almost part of your job to help them get to insight from that initial fight or flight response. So obviously, we don't want our customers to have long-term distress.
Right.
And it's not just events, it's literally every day. You think back to Starbucks last year when they had that situation where the two men were arrested from their store for just sitting there having a meeting. People went to Starbucks social media accounts looking for their response and looking for more information. And when they didn't get it, they went elsewhere, right? And they may have gotten misinformation. So it's not just events. It's literally anything that could potentially happen to your organization or your company.
Right.
And then the last is obviously, in that situation, your brand. Your brand is at risk. If you don't do crisis communications well, then you could potentially lose customers. You could potentially have your company fold. Companies have folded because they have handled a crisis situation poorly. It really is an important thing to do.
100%. Yeah. And there's actually communication in healthcare is a vertical, because obviously healthcare and hospitals, and there's so much involved with everything that's going on in those buildings, let alone if something, catastrophic happened. And so why wouldn't we have it in every other facet? I mean, granted, we're not, saving gunshot wound victims here on, in the events world, but we might be. I mean, that's the thing, is that you don't know.
You don't know anymore.
Right.
It's terrible to say that, but you don't know anymore. You kind of have to be prepared for everything, which takes time.
Right.
And that's why it's important to do those risk, matrices and figure out, where does this potential issue fall on our risk matrix so that we can be prepared for it.
Right. One of the things I learned in my communication master's program is to do a communication audit. And this is not a piece of that. This wasn't a piece of that. So it's interesting, because we were auditing how, on a high level, how everyone interacts with each other, how everyone communicates internally, and then how everyone communicates with their members, customers, prospects, partners. But this was not part of it. I think that would be a really good element to include. And the idea of an audit is it helps if it's an outside perspective. Yeah. Or somebody else that's leading the charge, because everyone biases, right, on what they think, how they think things are going. And even if you get stats, results that should not carry bias, kind of depends on how you're auditing, whether you're personally interviewing people, doing surveys, even people who take surveys, right? When you say it's totally private, no one will know, dollars to donuts, a lot of people won't want to run the risk on some of that. So auditing what everyone internally thinks their crisis communication plans or perspectives would be a really nice thing.
I work with some of my clients who are just like, I can't facilitate the vulnerability audit. We need an outside source to come in and do it. And then I have done that for these organizations to help facilitate the creation of this crisis communications plan. Because one, they don't know where to start, but also we're talking about things that some people don't want to admit that it's a potential threat. I mean, one of the categories of crisis is organizational misdeeds. I mean, you're talking about bankruptcy, you're talking about people higher up stealing money. I mean, these are not things that people are going to volunteer as a risk for their organization.
Yeah, the whole head in the sand thing. Yeah. Like if I just, ignore it, maybe it won't be a problem.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is super important with this course, and I think it would be great if you offered it, maybe not even in a necessarily live environment, but as an online course, something that that people can do sort of self-guided, but then could also have one-on-ones with you. I think that would be really valuable, and get the word out to even more people, because not everyone can take 6 hours in a row to take a course in person or even online. And you know how it goes when you're online, to have to pay attention for that long.
I mean, a lot.
Yeah. And they're at home, so they're doing they're making coffee, and they're there's the retention might not be quite as awesome as it would be if they were able to be self-guided and do an hour here, an hour there, and that kind of stuff.
And it's something I'm working on. Obviously my partnership with MPI has a certain, I have to do what they have offered. But I own the content. I'm developing other ways of presenting it as well. So we're working on other online capabilities, online courses. I'm also in the process of writing a book on it. So it's, it's something that I'm passionate about, and I understand the importance, and I don't believe enough people know about it or are talking about it. So for me, it's very personal. For me, any way that I can get this information out there, I'm going to try and get this information out there.
Perfect. Well, that half hour went fast, didn't it? Do you have any real quick, and maybe, we may end up doing a part 2. We'll see if we get some follow-up. Any cool, what's the latest tech gadget kind of app thing you're geeking out on right now?
Oh, latest tech gadget app that I'm geeking out on. I've been using a lot of photo apps and things like that. Try to work with stuff. I'm trying to do more video. So one thing I've been playing with is this software called Animoto. Animoto. Super easy to edit.
They make wave.video.
Yeah.
So it's the same. That's the same company, and that's mine. I was able to throw together 3 separate 20-second videos with a picture in between, and it fades in and out, and I can have their name scroll across, have the logo. It made me look pretty good. I was pretty excited about it. And it's pretty intuitive. It wasn't overnight, but every time I use it, it's like anything else. Every time I use it, I'm getting better and better.
Well, and it was nice because I was able to edit a video for one of my clients. I was not on site, and they wanted a video to show at the end of the conference, and I was like, "You've been sending me videos and photos over the last 3 days, so let me edit this together." And yeah, it was pretty easy. So I was happy with that.
Well, and they have templates too, so you can use their stuff, or you can plug in other things as well.
Yeah.
So very cool. All right. Well, thanks, Alex, once again for being on Making a Marketer. Thank you to everyone who watched, who listened, who's watching the replay. We appreciate you so much. Tell everyone the best way to get a hold of you.
So you can reach me online, pretty much any social media platform, at aplaxen, Plaxen. My website is conferenceengagement.com. And if you're interested in the crisis communications course, you can go to mpiweb.org/crisis to see upcoming dates and places where I'll be presenting it.
Perfect. And the best place to find me is on Twitter at Megan Powers. So thank you. This has been episode 31 of Making a Marketer, and we will catch you next time.